All right, good morning. It is Monday morning, 11 a.m. just about, and we're waiting on the 11 a.m. advisory. I think we're going to see maybe not significant changes in the track because at this point, the track is starting to get baked into the cake a little bit. Unfortunately, the track is so close and parallel in the coast that any little deviations to the track are going to bring significant impacts into the western part of Florida. But we're going to break it all down here, and I'm going to try not to stress the urgency with my voice because then I will get hoarse. So let's first off talk about what's the latest. This is our satellite imagery this morning, the infrared loop, and you can see the cold cloud tops there that have been continuing to build around Ian. And we saw this band of pretty good storms kind of race away from Ian. Now this is going to be one of the considerations going forward because as we are making preparations, especially along the west coast of Florida, and I'm not going to forget about South Florida because obviously, there is going to be some effects here. There are going to be some effects here. But the main thing is that this band coming up is an indication that the weather is going to go down before the center gets here, before the worst weather gets here. One thing you hear a lot of folks say is, well, when is landfall? Well, landfall is a point. We're talking about a big storm here. We want to know when the tropical storm conditions arrive because we want to wrap up everything by then. And once the 11 a.m. advisory comes in, I'll show you the latest timing based on that advisory for the tropical storm conditions. There's a little red line there. You can see that's the center right there. That red line is based on the 5 a.m. forecast track of where it should be, and that would have been over the last 6 hours. So the center should pop up right about there, and if it does, it's on track. I think that's probably going to be the case. Now, one of the things that we're going to be looking for as we go forward here is, because it's going to be closer to the coast here, is what we call wobbles. And my definition of a wobble is different than a turn because a wobble is something like this. So we're going along straight, and then we have a little jaunt, and then we resume that motion there. So wobbles, far out in the ocean, they happen all the time. Over areas away from land, they happen. They're a common occurrence. When they're a big deal is when a wobble occurs close to a coast, especially when the storm is forecast to go along the coast for a ways and then maybe inland. So wobbles can make a huge difference. Now, for those of you who remember Charlie did more of a turn. It looked at first like a wobble because it had some wobbles in there, but Charlie kind of did that kind of turning action as it came in to Punta Gorda and southwest Florida. So what we're going to be watching for as we get closer here to the storm, getting closer to us, is for those wobbles, because little wobbles make a big difference. That's what the former director of the National Hurricane Center would say often. There's the close-up picture there, and you can see, and this really, when it comes down to it, the part that is most destructive is the core of the storm area. That's where the highest winds are, that's where the most damage occurs, and that's the thing that we're going to hope stays offshore. Now, the 5 a.m. advisory had the core coming very close to the west coast of Florida and also coming onshore there, and so that would be a very bad scenario. Now, the other thing is, because of the motion around a hurricane is that the winds are blowing from south to north like that on the east side. And once you put land, which is going to be the case with the west coast of Florida, on that side where the water is being piled up, that's where we're going to have storm surge. And I think we're going to have some pretty big storm surge forecast numbers here coming out in the 11 a.m. advisory. So what we'll do is we will, of course, take our time, and when that advisory comes out, I'll show you the latest. All right, here's the radar, and you can already see that from the Key West radar, we have some showers coming up, but there's the leading edge of kind of the more persistent rain and some of the stronger winds. For those of you who haven't been through a hurricane, it's really kind of a strange process because you just think that it's going to get here and it's going to be the worst. A hurricane is kind of a gradual ramping up of the weather where a squall will come through and then it calms back down. It's cloudy and it's very humid and it's raining off and on. And then another squall will come through with some very gusty winds and then it calms back down. And what happens is that the squall will come through and then maybe 2 hours will go by and there's not much of anything going on. It's just it's breezy and it's kind of raining off and on. And then another big squall will come through. But that next squall was a little bit closer behind the last squall. And then after that, another squall will come in and it will be closer than the last squall until finally you're just kind of in it and it's raining and it's windy. And the closer you are to the center, the windier it is. Not necessarily, and the funny thing that I don't think people realize about hurricanes is that they're extremely efficient rain producers, but they're not big drops. There are just millions and millions of compact, small drops that are falling at a tremendous rate, and the water rises very quickly. That's from the rainfall flooding. Now, there have been some questions about what's our rainfall threat down here. I think we're still in this 3 to 6 inch range. One thing we don't want to have happen, and let me draw on this map to kind of give an example here, is that Ian is going up here, and on the right side of Ian, one of these primary feeder bands sets up over us. Because what happens is that feeder band, as Ian goes on to the north, that feeder band is going to want to stick over us because it's going to be, the feeder band expands outward, but Ian's moving away, which may pull it back towards us. So that's something that you really can't predict with ease. It's something we watch for, and you kind of know it after it's set up. That's the thing with those big feeder bands. So we're going to be watching that very closely as well. All right, let's talk about the overall steering pattern here. I talked about this a couple of days ago, and it's that big trough, the big dip in the jet stream right there. We've got the blocking highs. The one to our east right now is pretty much in control. So there's kind of the western end of it there, and that is what is steering Ian to the north. And you can even see it was moving this westward track, and then it got stronger and started sensing that big blocking high to the east. So this motion would continue except for the fact that we've got this dip in the jet stream there, and that dip in the jet stream gives an influence to the east there. That's what would, in theory, make Ian turn from more of a north direction to more of a northeast direction. So here's the complicated factor. Here's the thing with this. We're expecting the models to forecast two things. Not only does it have to get exactly where this jet stream dip is and how far south it goes and how long it lasts, we also have to get the model to then take the storm and have the jet stream or whatever it is, that influence on the storm itself. So we're forecasting not only the jet stream dip, but we're also forecasting, the model is, what influence does it have on the storm. And the models have been kind of crazy, kind of back and forth. And so a lot of times we think that when we have high uncertainty, it's probably a case like this because we're forecasting two things here. We're not forecasting just one. We're forecasting the jet stream dip as well as how the storm interacts with the jet stream dip. So let's go forward into time here. Here we are for Tuesday morning. You can see the jet stream dip is still holding on there. Ian is coming north, getting closer. Let's go a little bit more forward there. Now we're into the Wednesday time frame, and actually I'm going to set up my other computer here to get ready for the advisory, so the second it comes in we can get it to you. So that's the Wednesday morning time frame, and the jet stream dip is starting to leave, but the real question is on Wednesday and Thursday, is there enough residual jet stream dip to turn Ian more to the northeast, or is it going to just go more northward? It's a tough forecast, and unfortunately it has huge implications because a little turn to the northeast could make a big difference for folks on the west coast. And then after that, it moves on out of there. All right, so while we're waiting on the Ian advisory to come in, let me back up here and talk a little bit more about this track that's going to be coming up here, and I'll use the radar map to show that because it kind of shows the Florida coastline there. So once again, what I was saying is that with the Florida coastline going in this direction like that, and with Ian kind of coming in this direction like that, or maybe even a little bit more to the northeast, something like that. The thing is that little wobbles are going to make a big difference. So here, let's say is Ian, and then we get a little wobble there, and now we resume this north course, and now you can see that has offset the worst of the storm westward. So that's one of the things we're really going to be watching for here as well. Lots of folks saying good morning, folks. Good to see familiar faces there. Always good to know that there's people that are around when we're in a big storm situation like this. Let me go ahead and bring up one of the forecasts that I was looking at here, and this is kind of more of a rainfall forecast here, and it's really an estimate of the possibility of flash flooding. And when we think of flash flooding in Florida, it's not so much that the water comes rushing in, it's just that it rises up pretty quickly. And so to exceed the flash flooding here, we'd be better than 4 inches, and we're in the yellow area there. And so there's at least a chance that we could have some significant flooding here. Now, the values are higher for Central Florida because that's where the storm center is expected to be, but they're still high statewide from north to south. So I think flooding here in southeast Florida, Central Florida, South Florida, just about all of the peninsula is the big thing. But I think for us here in South Florida, flooding is going to be something we're really, really going to have to watch out for, because if the storm, like I said, if it slows down and it maintains that persistent feeder band, then we could see significant flooding. Now, I hate it when this happens because sometimes I forget which storm it was. I just remember the impacts. But we had a storm. It may have been Dennis, but it was a storm that was moving up the Eastern Gulf. And what happened was as it moved up the Eastern Gulf, we got set up in one of those feeder bands. And let me move back here. And the storm was moving away, so everybody was thinking, well, we're through the worst of it. But this feeder band, which was very impressive, set up right to the east of Broward County and over Palm Beach County. And it dumped anywhere from 10 to 15 inches of rain over a period of about 12 hours. It was very, very bad flooding in Palm Beach County. It didn't do much in Broward or Miami-Dade. That's how sometimes specific a feeder band can be. So that's one of the things we're going to have to watch out for. And as I said, we won't know until it actually sets up over us. Let's go take a look at the satellite loop once again. Now, one of the things I noticed was that the hurricane hunters, I think their most recent report was 978 on the pressure. The last advisory was carrying 983, so that's down another 5 millibars. And I think we're going to see in this new advisory, when it comes in, the winds have also come up. I know lots of folks talking to me from Punta Gorda, as well as the West Coast, all the way up the West Coast, and even the lower Keys. Once again, I don't expect a big track shift. What happens is that as a storm gets closer, in this case, we see fewer shifts in the short term. So in other words, when it's closer to us time-wise, and now it's within 1 to 2 days, then this uncertainty, our uncertainty with the storm goes down. Upstream from us in Central Florida, the uncertainty is still very, very high. But our uncertainty here in South Florida is gradually going down. And the longer that Ian continues this track here and makes this northwest motion without any wobbles, that would set the track a little bit to the right, and without any turns, which would turn the track to the right, we're feeling pretty good here in Miami-Dade and Broward. I know some folks think in terms of all or nothing, so we're not going to get anything. No, we're going to get, you will notice that a tropical storm, that a hurricane's going by because of the conditions here. We will be windy in Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach. We'll be windy in the Keys. We're going to have squalls. We're going to have a pretty bad weather day, and that once again begins during the late hours tomorrow and continues through tomorrow night. And once that comes up, we will break down all of the possibilities on the tracks as well. So this is called tap dancing here because we are waiting for that advisory, but once again, the second it comes in, we will go right to it. And one of the things that happens here as we get into a busy situation at the Hurricane Center is they're coordinating watches and warnings. Sometimes they're waiting for one more pass of the plane. I think I can put the plane up. So nope, that was an earlier flight. Let's get the latest flight here and show you where that is. So I think, yeah, so that plane, yeah. So the Hurricane Center likely waiting for one more pass of the plane there to see what the plane reported, to put it into the advisory, because they want all the details exact on that when it comes in the advisory. When the advisory, and from being in TV for 37 years and 25 in Florida, our graphics, even though they build as soon as the advisory comes in, sometimes we need to make little adjustments and stuff like that. So here it comes. Okay, here comes the advisory. So let's go ahead and take a look at the advisory as it is coming in, and let me get to that graphic, and here we go. All right, so 11 a.m. It is 80 mile an hour Category 1 hurricane now, still moving to the northwest at 13 miles an hour. The pressure, they said, is at 870 millibars. There's the public advisory, and you saw the distance 100 miles west of Grand Cayman pop in there. So now you're reading this along with me. In fact, I'm going to get a hard copy here to kind of just scan it, because some of the details will have been updated, and we need to kind of go through all that, and then we'll go through the track as well. And it is at least a 3-page advisory here. It's a 4-page advisory, so definitely a lot to cover here. Maybe it's a 5-page advisory. Okay. It is a long advisory, so it's important always to read through everything. So you saw the headline there: Ian forecast to continue rapidly strengthening conditions of western Cuba deteriorate this evening. Let's talk first about the changes in the watches and warnings, and then we'll check that on the graphic as well. Tropical storm watch on the west coast of Florida has been extended from Chokoloskee southward to Flamingo, so that does include more of Florida Bay now. The tropical storm watch has been issued for the Florida Keys from 7 Mile Bridge east to the 5 Mile Channel, so now the Middle Keys are in a tropical storm watch. So the thinking would be when you're making the watches and warnings, you're looking at those wind radii that you're putting together with your forecast, and it looks like the wind radii may extend a little bit farther to the east now into the Middle Keys. So in the abundance of caution, the National Hurricane Center is saying that there is the possibility for tropical storm conditions in the Middle Keys. That, of course, includes Marathon, and a tropical storm warning remains in effect for the lower Keys. Tropical storm watch has also been issued for Lake Okeechobee. Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach are not in any type of watches or warnings at this time. And the expectation still is that no watches or warnings will be required, but that's an expectation. And if the storm wind field is forecast to expand even more, then the watches could extend a little bit farther west. So let's go ahead and talk about the advisory here and go through the future track here now, as I kind of skim down here all the watches and warnings that are in effect, and we'll cover that in detail too as well. So this is the 8 p.m. position Monday evening there on the track, and you can see the tropical storm winds approaching the western provinces of Cuba. And then there is the 8 a.m. Tuesday. The forecast intensity is Category 3, it looks like, but when they put these points down, so the storm could be intensifying to 4 just beyond that point, but at that point right there, which they have to do it based on a time stamp. It's not a forecast intensity stamp. It's based on the time at that location. That's the intensity forecast. So that's 8 a.m. on Tuesday. Now, as Ian moves across Cuba, our winds will respond to that here in South Florida and over the Keys. In fact, the Keys winds will start responding tonight, and then they will continue to respond all the way up into South Florida tomorrow. You'll know because the winds will be blowing starting tomorrow morning, even late tonight, you'll start to hear some gusts there. So there is the 8 p.m. forecast on Tuesday. Category 4 is still the forecast, and at least according to this here, the tropical storm conditions are into the lower Keys, but there's the possibility now, the Hurricane Center, I believe, is thinking, I'm not in their heads, they're much smarter than I am, that a little deviation to the east would put tropical storm conditions into the Middle Keys. So that's certainly a consideration there as well. Let's move forward here now. So here we are at 8 a.m. on Wednesday, Category 4, and you can see here clearly it doesn't matter in Cape Coral, in Fort Myers, in Naples, in Sarasota, if you are in or out of the cone. The cone is only tracking the center point. We care about where the tropical storm and hurricane conditions are. And you can see tropical storm conditions are way outside of the cone here. In fact, you can see they even expanded a little bit farther to the east in the Keys there as the storm was passing by. So almost touching the Middle Keys, thus the tropical storm watch for the Middle Keys now. Let's go forward into time here. There is 8 p.m. on Wednesday, and the storm is slowing down. The intensity trend is starting to go down a little bit because we're expecting increasing wind shear now, especially after the 2-day time frame. And then the wind shear really ramps up after that. There are the hurricane conditions arriving right along the west coast there of Florida. And then there we go into the Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Category 2 is the forecast at that time period. And you can see clearly that the hurricane conditions extend well inland according to this advisory here almost all of Hillsborough County, as well as Manatee, Sarasota counties, and on up to the north there. So then we'll move forward here for one more time stamp. There we are Friday, and you can see there is the possibility of hurricane conditions even extending up toward the Big Bend, but according to this advisory, they are not, the threat is not as high. And look at the tropical storm conditions here. We're kind of in a little bit of a hole here in South Florida where we are not in tropical storm conditions, but because the storm is expected to expand as it weakens and as it approaches the coast, then the tropical storm conditions do reach over to the east coast there. So basically, this is about Port St. Lucie all the way up, so up through Jacksonville, tropical storm conditions. So the big impacts here, of course, in this yellow area outside of the hurricane force winds would be tremendous rainfall as well as strong enough winds for widespread power outages. That does not apply to Miami-Dade, Broward, and the Key and Palm Beaches because the winds don't look strong enough to cause widespread power outages. Power outages, yes, we'll have some power outages, but not widespread. And then finally there it's on up into Georgia as a weakening tropical storm. All right, here are the latest watches and warnings. You can see the tropical storm watch now has been extended for much of central Florida, including Lake Okeechobee there. The Middle Keys now in the tropical storm watch. You can see the tropical storm warning for Key West. The hurricane watch remains for Tampa Bay. So basically we're here basically north of Fort Myers, so that's Inglewood on north there. That's where the hurricane watch is in effect. I think later today we'll see this part of the watches be upgraded to a hurricane warning and the hurricane watch extended up the coast there. So it's kind of piecemeal, stepstone here as we go. All right, let's talk about the storm surge potential. The storm surge watch is still in effect, and that's one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about here to see if these values came up. So storm surge, so now for Tampa Bay, the storm surge values are for 5 to 10 feet. And I know much of Tampa has already, in many areas across the West Coast in Tampa Bay, Hillsborough County, they've gone ahead and gone to Zone A, or the first tier of evacuations is mandatory and the second tier is voluntary. Probably not a bad idea because this is going to be such a close call to heed those evacuation advisories. So the middle of Longboat Key down to Inglewood, so that's basically farther south of Tampa Bay, that's 5 to 8 feet. Inglewood to Bonita Beach, so that's farther south, that's basically around the Fort Myers area to near Naples, that's 3 to 5 foot storm surge, and on down to Florida Bay as well as the Florida Keys, it's 2 to 4 feet of storm surge there. Storm surge is the values there are the water depth over normally dry land. So it's not above sea level, it's above normally dry land. So right, as some of our viewers are saying, not the best morning here in Tampa area. No, I'm sure the stress level is off the scale and rightfully so. This is a very, very stressful situation. Let's talk about some timing here because we want to have things wrapped up before the arrival of tropical storm winds. And there you can see the watches are plotted as well. But it's this leading edge here, that yellow area. We want to have things wrapped up before that area gets to you. The weather could be quite bad before that yellow area gets there, but the yellow area represents when the government services, they basically fall back and wait for the storm to get through. So you want to have everything done well before that. So that is around a sunrise arrival for the lower Keys there, moving there and then kind of paralleling the Keys through much of the day tomorrow. On the west coast from Naples, you can see the closest approach now is in the afternoon tomorrow. So I think for the lower Keys, middle Keys, everything wrapped up by sunset tonight. And maybe on the west coast, Naples, Fort Myers, up, you have a little bit of time tomorrow morning. But if you can get it done today before sunset, that would be my recommendation. Then after that, that's 5 p.m. Here we are Tuesday evening now, and then we are up into Sarasota County, as well as Tampa Bay now, Manatee County, Hillsborough, and Pinellas County. So that arrival is for Tuesday night. So we're going to want to have things wrapped up in the Tampa Bay area, basically from south to north. So Sarasota, Manatee, Hillsborough, Pinellas, on up to Pasco. That should be taking place. Southern areas there, Sarasota and stuff, midday Tuesday, which is tomorrow. and then by the Tampa Bay area, by all means tomorrow night. So that's kind of the thinking there. And then after that, it's on up to the north, so up through Hernando and Citrus counties, it's Wednesday morning. So Tuesday evening by sunset, basically up along the counties north of Tampa Bay, you'll want to have things wrapped up. And then you can see the winds, they extend right on the edge of the tropical storm watch area there. Those might be upgraded to a tropical storm warning. That's, I think, right now a timing issue. And into Orlando Wednesday evening. So folks in Orlando, you'll want to have your plans kind of ready to go midday Wednesday. And then on to the north, there we are. And you can see in the Panhandle, closest approach is also Wednesday evening. So you'll want to have things wrapped up probably Wednesday morning in the Panhandle. And then after that, it's up towards Jacksonville, but you can see the winds. Well, they do come across, so some tropical storm conditions there in North Florida as well. And in fact, if you look at it, I think only the far western part of the Florida Peninsula, the Florida Panhandle, as well as Southeast Florida, looks like we will avoid potentially the worst of this storm. So let's break down the timing, what we should be doing now. Taking care of items, yard items, things that could blow around, securing boats. Closest approach would be during the time frame for Southeast Florida, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. For Tuesday night's the closest approach, but we want to take care of things well before then. We probably want to take care of things by this evening, by sunset this evening, for all of South Florida. Closest approach is going to be Tuesday night as well in the middle and upper Keys, but now there's an increasing threat for possibility, I should say, of tropical storm conditions in the middle Keys. Lower Keys, of course, we have the tropical storm warning where tropical storm conditions are expected. So the preps should finish sunset today there. So all of South Florida, Keys, Southwest Coast, Naples, Marco Island, sunset today to have everything done. Closest approach is going to be Tuesday night in those areas. And of course, we're checking our hurricane kit, taking care of yard items, repair homes and boats. Shutters, it's always a close call, especially when you're in the stronger tropical storm conditions, which may be the case in Naples and areas towards Fort Myers. So if you can get them up and you can do it with ease and it makes you feel more comfortable going through this storm, by all means do it. There could be evacuations along the West Coast. I haven't seen that yet. That's not to say that they haven't been issued, from Naples north, but please pay attention to your local emergency managers for that. Farther to the north, finish preps by sunset on Tuesday, especially north of Tampa Bay, but for Tampa Bay and areas to the south, I would say by midday Tuesday. That's tomorrow, midday tomorrow. So look, the clock is ticking here. We're kind of running out of time here in the Tampa Bay area, and I know you want to wait and wait and wait. It's a natural tendency because it's such a hard lift to prepare for a hurricane, but our time is pretty much up because of the possibility that if you're wrong, thinking that it's just going to miss you and it doesn't miss you, you really don't have time to get the preps done. So in this case, of course, shutters, I'm going to say yes for that red area there. If you have them, put them up and get it done today. And evacuations in the designated areas. Tomorrow it'll be taking care of indoor preps, really getting ready for the storm. And by Wednesday, everybody pretty much should stay where they're going to ride out the storm. That's for Wednesday. That's the timeline there. Farther to the north, finish the preps by sunset Wednesday. That's for the Big Bend and parts of the Panhandle there. Checking your hurricane kit, of course. Prepare your homes and boats. Shutters and evacuations, still too early to call on that. The final preps are Wednesday, and then ready to shelter in place on Thursday. So that's kind of all that's going on. I saw a question in the chat, and let me find a way to kind of explain it here with one of my maps, which I'm looking for my water vapor map. So I know it's buried in here somewhere. The maps tend to grow when you do lots of hits and talk about lots of things. Okay, so here it is. So let's talk about this potential for dry air and wind shear. And let me see if I can even zoom in here and we can kind of talk in detail. So this is the water vapor loop here. There you can see the storm down to the south there. Let me get it looping here again. And it's coming up to the north. And one of the things you can see here is this dry air that is, it's just loading there. So this dry air that is still in advance of the system. Now that dry air is going to tend to get pushed to the north as Ian gets closer. So that will kind of moisten up there. But the question is going to be with really strong flow here, and you can see the strong flow as well. It's that strong west-east motion that's blowing through there on the bottom of that jet stream dip. is that going to push some of this dry air that's not over here right now? Is that going to push dry air off to the west into it? It's a very high likelihood, and that's why the Hurricane Center is talking about the wind speeds coming down, the categories, and the intensity coming down. Normally, you'd think, wow, it's going to strengthen right to the coast, right? So a lot of folks have been saying this morning, why is the intensity going down as it's getting farther along? So, unfortunately, the dry air and the shear is not as strong as the storm is approaching Tampa area. So it's probably going to be a very strong storm, but starting its weakening trend. And the thing about weakening storms is that tight core tends to expand, so you don't have as much of a high wind event in the tight core. It's still a high wind event. It's still, say, Category 3. It's a major hurricane. It's a destructive hurricane. But now the downside is it's spreading out. Those winds are spreading out. So now the hurricane wind field is growing. The tropical storm wind field is growing. All that energy that was concentrated towards the middle and a very, very intense core is gradually spreading out as the intensity comes down. And I say with great caution when I use the words weakening, because when you go from a Category 4 to a Category 3, are you really weakening? If you were a Category 1 going to a Category 3, Category 3 seems really bad on that end. Going from Category 4 to Category 3 is not necessarily weakening. So let's see who else is on here this morning. We'll talk about some things. So that's the dry air question. You're welcome for doing these things. Today's overcast. So today's overcast kind of is indirectly related to it. You can see it right there. Maybe I've got a visible satellite loop here and we can see the storm there. Well, that visible satellite loop is not in the right place at all. And I don't even know if this is going to load. So there you go. So you can see here as it loads up here, because we're now kind of doing it live, right? So you can see this first little band of clouds has kind of run up here ahead of Ian down there. There, of course, is the core. And so these clouds that are coming up here are indirectly probably some of the high overcast in advance of Ian. But the deeper clouds and the more persistent overcast is going to be when that band down there gets to the south. But good questions, everybody. Good questions. Yep, overcast also in Broward. I think tomorrow, that's when we'll start to see the winds coming up as well. So I think that's the latest for now. If you guys liked it, by all means, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. I have to always do my like, subscribe, and share thing. And share it with your friends, especially on the West Coast. I know right now everybody is craving information, and of course, we're thinking about them. I've already got my plan to help my family that lives in the Tampa Bay area, and we've been talking this morning and talking about what they're going to do, and of course, get ready. So you're welcome for the update. The villages. So the villages, folks there, prepare for power outages and possible flooding. I mean, the wind swath there is going to be pretty big. It doesn't take a lot of wind to bring trees down in our densely covered state with lots of foliage. So prepare for power outages and flooding for much of the state. And if you're in that hurricane threat area, by all means, take heed of what the local officials are saying. Hopefully they're stressing it enough. I know a lot of Floridians that if you don't go through a hurricane, and a lot of close calls, but they seem to miss every time. The tendency is to not take this one seriously, but you're betting on that for like 1 in 5 chance that it isn't going to hit, and that 1 in 5 if it hits, it's really, really bad. And the big takeaway, and all the previous Hurricane Center directors have said it, and all the folks who've studied hurricane history, they say a community and a family and people that are prepared for a hurricane event do much, much better than those who haven't prepared. And so in terms of preparations, once again, it's twofold. We're preparing in terms of preparing our house, preparing our boats, preparing where we live, because we want that to stay intact, to not have severe damage. We don't want the wind to get inside. That's why we shutter, to keep the wind out. Once again, it's not a shutter event for Miami-Dade, Broward, or Palm Beach. It's a borderline shutter event for the lower keys. It's very low borderline shutter event for the middle keys. Lower keys, it's kind of borderline middle high, and then the southwest coast all the way up through the Tampa Bay area. It looks like a shutter event based on what we're seeing right here. So thanks again, everybody, for watching. Share it with your friends. Let them know what's going on. And I'll be back today about 4:40, because I know they're pushing the advisories right up to 5 o'clock. And so I don't want to, sing and dance, do the song and dance thing too long until the advisory gets started. So we'll see you today about 4:45. We'll shoot for today. See you then.